Oh, sup. So I'm John, BenderWaffles Aljets, and this is a little awkward because it's been a really long time since I did one of these videos. Sorry. So today we're gonna go over defining a character class. Yeah, that's what we're doing. So let's just get over to my computer and yeah, let's do that, I suppose. Right? Is that the right thing to do? I think so. It's been a long time. Okay, so we're here in RPG Maker, and to get to the character classes, you just bring up the database, and then you click over to the classes tab. Now, for this project, we only need 3 classes, so if you have to change the maximum to 3, go ahead and do it. You could also just leave the default ones in there. I think there's about 10 in there by default. I've already gone ahead and cleared out the 3 classes. You can go ahead and do that if you want, or you can just edit the defaults that are there. So I'm not going to go super in depth about how to do all 3 of them. I'm not even going to show you me doing the 3 of them, because that, guys, is homework. That's what I want you guys to do. I want you to define the character classes and then send me a screenshot of your character classes via Twitter. Twitter is over. It's somewhere on the screen. That's the point. All right, let's do this. Class number 1, the very first thing that you do when you're defining a class is you got to name it. So our main character is going to be a warrior. Cool. When you're doing character classes, you tend to want to stick to a few archetypes for making things just kind of easy to understand. So there's the tank archetype, the melee damage archetype, the non-melee damage archetype, and then the healer archetype. So a main character is usually going to be a melee sort of tank kind of thing. You think about like Cloud or Tidus, or really any memorable main character. They always were the kind of person who runs in and smacks people in the face, and they could take some hits. So that's what our main character is going to be. He's going to be a warrior. Coming over here to the second section that we're going to look at is the experience curve. Now this is where things get really complicated, potentially. We're going to leave them as defaults, but basically what all of these numbers are is the amount of experience at each level that is required to level up to the next level. So at level 1, to get to level 2, you have to get 50 experience. Level 2 to level 3, you got to get 112, etc., etc., etc. You can change this by changing the base value, which changes the level 1 number, and then subsequently, works its way out through all the rest of the numbers. Also, changing the acceleration changes the rate at which that exponential growth grows. The same with acceleration B, and extra value also messes with that. Extra value basically meaning like, oh, we're going to add on an extra amount on top of what the acceleration and base values calculate out. You can also go through and like just sort of kind of change stuff up yourself if you really want to. You can't necessarily go through and just do it level by level by level, but you can just mess with these sort of things and get it to a number that you want. For game balance reasons and things of that nature, sticking with the default for now is fine, but you can experiment, you can play with it within your own project and sort of work things out for yourself. So we're coming here down to our perimeter curves. This is where you actually define the actual classes of the character, or the actual stats of the classes. I will get this right at some point. So yes, I'm going to go through and I'm just going to kind of show you one by one and tell you about what each one of them means. But first we're going to go through and we're going to look at how do you actually define a stat? How do you change it? How do you make it what you want? So we're going to go here. We're going to double click on MHP. MHP being the max HP of the character. Hit points being their health. So yes, you come down here and you get this window that looks like this. You've got this sort of line graph. You've got all these buttons, and things gets really confusing really quick. Actually, if you know what you're looking at, it's really simple. So this line here, that is the actual curve of growth. That is just a graph showing the exponential rise of that stat as you level, with the x-axis being, so if you're looking at it as a graph, the x-axis is what level and the y-axis is what the stat number is. So let's kind of go over that a little bit. So if you'll notice, level 1, 450 health. That ain't bad. Now if we look at level 99, which would be the far end of this graph here, 5,350. Pretty good. Note that this is before equipment, before anything that would add any sort of extra amount of health onto it. That's pretty good, but for our sort of tanky character, that's not enough at level 99. So what are we going to do to change this? Well, we could go through and go with the quick settings and sort of choose a default line that looks right to us, but that's kind of a lazy way of doing things. We're going to click this button here that says Generate Curve. And we are going to get this menu here. This menu is going to ask us, what do we want the health to be like at level 1? And what do we want the health to be like at level 99? You know, pretty good question to ask. At level 1, we're going to go 720. I don't know why my 0 on my numpad isn't working. And then at level 99, we're going to put it at 8754. Again, before equipment. You don't need to put 9999 at your level 99 amount for them to have max health, because your armor and equipment will probably make up for that. Then down here we have fast, verge, and slow. That's average if you've got a higher resolution. Yeah, it's average. So this just basically shows what the curve itself will look like. So this line back here. So let's see what would happen if we take these numbers and we set it to a super slow curve. That line becomes concave. And what that is saying is that at the beginning, the character is going to gain health at a very, very slow rate. However, as they get higher and higher, it's going to get faster and faster and faster until they reach their max amount. So, like, for instance, you look at level 1, it's 720. Level 2, it's only 721. Level 3, 724, etc., etc., etc. Now, if you get up to, like, the 80s, you know, suddenly that health amount starts to grow really rapidly. So, you know, that might be what you want. That's not quite what we want right now. But what if we went with a fast graph? Well, we get a convex line. Now, what this is doing is the complete opposite. The early levels, you're gaining health really quickly. At the higher levels, you're gaining health really, really slowly. It starts to flatten out. So we're going to go with something that's kind of a little bit more towards average, but kind of on the faster side of things. We're going to go about there. So now it's a little bit convex, but it's still pretty even. So again, I'm not going to go through that with every stat. Now I'm just going to kind of tell you what each stat does and sort of how it fits within the archetypes that I sort of told you to use. So the next one up is Max MP. That is MMP. So this is just like Max HP, except it's their magic points. So that's the energy that they use to cast spells and to use special abilities. A mage, a caster, non-melee damaging character, healer, they would have much higher max MP than they probably would max HP. So basically do what you did with the max HP here, but with max MP for them. Pretty reasonable, pretty understandable. Then we've got ATK, which is attack. This is how much damage a melee attack will do. So if you've got a class that is focused on hitting something, then make sure that the attack is high, because the higher the attack, the more damage the melee attacks will do. Pretty, you know, not difficult stuff. DEF, that is defense. This is their defense rating against physical attacks. So not magic, not special. This is against physical attacks. This is against getting hit by something. A tanky-like character will have high defense, because then what that does is when the skill formula comes through and subtracts the amount for their defense, the higher the defense, the less damage they will take. And again, remember that this defense stat is before equipment. So equipment will add additional defense on top of it. Then you have MAT, which is your magic attack. This is just like attack, except it is specifically for magic and special abilities. So a caster, a healer, will have a much higher MAT setting than any of the others. Just keep that in mind. You also have MDF. This is for magic damage what defense is for physical damage. So if you have a character that is let's say a magic hunter, somebody who hunts mages, they will probably have a much higher magic defense than they would, any of the others, because they are used to taking magical attacks. So a tank will probably have also pretty high magic defense. Agility. This one is interesting because this one actually determines the turn order within the battle system. Characters with a higher agility will attack first than people with a lower agility. So if you have a melee attacker who's like a thief or a ninja or a rogue or something like that, they're going to have a much higher agility because they're going to attack a lot faster. They might have a lower attack stat itself, but they will get in more hits, sort of evening that out. That's one of those ideas that you need to think about as far as game balance. If you have a character that's super high agility, you probably want to pull their attack and defense down because they're going to be attacking a lot more often. Then you've got luck. Luck is not necessarily set to any one archetype. Sure, you look at characters like I just mentioned, like thieves, ninjas, rogues, things of that nature, they might have a higher luck, because what luck actually does is it determines your chances of getting a critical hit and things of that nature. So while thieves and stuff might have a higher chance of that, you might want to make them have a higher chance, really it comes down to a character basis, not just class, but character itself. You have to be thinking about, is this character a particularly lucky character? Is this character particularly accurate? Are they going to be able to hit those weak spots in the armor and cause those critical hits? You just kind of got to think about it on a case-by-case basis. It does not fit within any real archetype. So those are all the stats. Those are sort of, kind of important things to keep in mind as we go through and as we develop our game. You'll probably run into situations where you'll run into a battle where you're like, oh, this boss is going to be super hard. And then you test it and you're going to see your characters just mop the floor with it. So you're like, well, you know what? Maybe I should lower their stats a little bit so that it becomes more balanced and I get that challenge that I want. Alternatively, you might have the flip side of that where you'll go into a boss battle and you'll be like, this is the first boss. It's meant to be easy. And next thing you know, you're just going to get steamrolled and you're like, what just happened? And you think to yourself, well, maybe I should raise, this guy's defense or this guy's attack or I should change up, this one's luck or something of that nature just to sort of balance things out. When it comes to stats and just game balance in general, it's all about playtesting and it's all about tweaking, experimenting, and until you get that nice golden area where you want your game to exist. And stats play into a huge part of that when developing an RPG. Our next section over here is the features. This is where the actual uniqueness of the class really starts to come out. This is where you define stuff like what type of weapons they use, what type of armors do they use, do they have a specific element that works with that class, things of that nature. So I'm going to show you how to use that right now. Up here we have these 4 parameters. Really don't need to mess with those. I might do a future video specifically on those 4 parameters, but for the most part, when you're making a simple project like this, you don't need to mess with those. These are just things like, what is the chance of hitting? What is their base critical chance? What is their, it's things of that nature. It's nice to understand, but it's not necessary. So it's not something that I'm going to go too in depth on. But what I am going to go a little bit in depth on is things like how to choose what type of skill the person uses. So this person is a warrior, so he's not going to have a magic skill type. He's going to have the special skill type. Within another part of this database here, you can database. Within a certain part of the database here, you can define what different skill types are. By default, you have special and magic. Special being more towards like melee physical users, and magic being magic. So, spells, fireballs, things of that nature. So he's a warrior, so he's going to have special because he wants to be able to cleave, do bull rush, maybe he wants to do armor break or something of that nature. Maybe he wants to be able to use a defense ability so that he can jump in front of people and take hits for them, things of that nature. So special is good for your sort of melee physical attackers, or, non-melee physical attackers. It's anybody who isn't a mage. Now we're going to define what sort of weapons he can use. Now, this character, I want him to be able to equip swords and katanas. So you pull it up, you bring up a new window, and you go over here to equip weapon, and first thing we're going to do is swords. Then we're going to do it again and make it so that you can equip katanas. And you know what? Let's make it real interesting. He can also equip bows. Let's give him a ranged weapon type. So, cool. That's pretty much just on a case-by-case basis, depending on what type of weapon you want to equip. Note that, like, the obvious melee weapons, like swords and katanas and axes and spears and things of that nature, are probably going to be understood to be more of melee attackers sort of weapons than things like staffs and rods. Just, use some common sense and some understanding of what those weapons actually are and were to sort of be able to define what you want your classes to use. Next up, we're going to choose their armor types. This is just like weapon, except it's a different menu there. So he's going to be able to equip general armor, light armor, heavy armor, and I want him to be able to use shields. Now, shields fall under the armor subtype, I guess, is what you would call it. So he's going to be able to use the two different kinds of shields. That looks pretty good. So he could be using a bow and a shield. That would look weird, but it works. Next thing you know, we're going to come up here and we are going to choose, see if there's anything else that we need from him. Let's give him an element type. So if you wanted to, don't think I'm going to do this, but if you wanted to set so that his attack is a specific element, you would go in here and you would set it. Like, let's say every time that he attacks, he's going to deal fire damage. So that's going to be really good against, like, ice enemies that, fire is going to melt them immediately. But if you're facing another fire enemy, oh no, maybe his attack is going to heal them instead of, dealing damage to them. It's just something to, if you really want to make your character super unique. I'm not going to use that, but it's there. So next thing you know, we've got the notes down here. This is for if you're using specific plugins or add-ons to the program, you would define certain things within the note. I'm not going to do that right now. We aren't doing anything with that. So we're just going to kind of move on from that section. Now we've got the skills. This is where you figure out at what level they're going to learn what skills. So we're going to double click on it, and let's say that we want our guy to learn, go through the skill list, which we're going to be going over how to define a skill in a future episode, so keep an eye out for that. We want him to be able to learn cleave at level 3. So we define the level, we defined what skill we want him to learn, and click OK. So now at level 3, as our character levels up, when he reaches that level, a little message pop up and be like, this person learned cleave, and now cleave will be in their special skill type menu in battle. Pretty nice stuff. So you just go through here and you define out what level and what skills and stuff. When it comes to learning abilities and their levels, you don't really want, like, at the beginning of the level progression, you want levels to be super close knit. So, like, I would probably add my next skill would be like 5 or 6, and then maybe 10, and then 12, etc., etc., etc. But as it gets higher up in level, like let's say at 35 I learn an ability, I'm probably not going to learn another ability until like 40, 42, somewhere in that range. So as you level up, the abilities get more powerful, but they get more spaced out when you learn them. Just sort of keep that in mind. A good way of looking at skill learning is go to Bulbapedia, link down below, and look up Pokemons, like their Pokemans, their their level, their like ability learning curves. So like look at what level they learn specific abilities, and you'll see a lot of abilities are front loaded within the first like 30 levels. You'll see them really stacked up, and then after that they'll learn like maybe 5 abilities over the next like 20 levels. It's, at most that many. So just take a look at that and sort of see how they do things and sort of apply that to your own skill based defining thing. A thing to sort of note when you're making games of any type is that you should look at what other games have done to try to learn from what they're doing, because that is years and years and years of experience that you can then leverage to learn things yourself and to make your projects better. So don't be afraid to go out there and look at things, even if the game that you're looking at isn't related to what your type of game is. Just because we're making a JRPG doesn't mean that the way that we do things has to be specifically based off of Final Fantasy or Dragon Quest or, Suikoden or any of those sort of things. It can be, we can look at Pokemon for inspiration. We can look at Super Mario for inspiration. We can look at anything for inspiration. We could look at Guitar Hero for inspiration. It's just look at everything, see how things have been done, and if you like it, try to implement that. Try to use that. Because, these are the people who make those games are probably, I can almost guarantee, far better at it than you. So if you can glean some insight from what they've done and make your projects better, great. Go ahead and do it. I encourage you to do it. In fact, you know what? Another piece of homework. Go out there, look at 5 games that aren't RPGs, and see if there's anything that you can sort of put into your game. And you know what? Tweet at me about it. There's going to be, my tweet link is somewhere on here, or it's in the description. Just tweet it at me. Be like, hey, what would be a good idea is if you put this into the game. And I'd be like, you know what? That would be cool. Figure out how to do it. But anyways, back to classes after that rant. So now let's say we've sort of finished our class. We like him the way he is. We're going to click apply so that it saves it. Then we're going to go into our actors page, find the actor that you want to put the class on, go to their class drop down window here, make sure you choose the right one, and click apply. So now that class is linked to that character. And that's it. That's the whole process. So just a couple things I want to cover really quickly. The next video will be no more than 2 weeks out. I'm working on a new look for the show, hence why this episode looks really janky and really weird. It will look better in the future, even better than it did before. So we will also be covering in the next video map creation, specifically exterior maps, so stuff like villages and castles. If you want to see that, you can click this button here. That'll take you to the video. If it's not up, however, that will take you to my channel page where you can subscribe. If you like this video, give it a like, leave a comment down below, give me shit for being a piece of crap and not doing a video in a month. Again, sorry. If you guys really, really like this video, you can click this button here to go to my Patreon page where you can support me directly. As always, guys, don't forget to subscribe and have a good one.